Hello everyone, in this video I'll be covering my discipline tips on the Queen's Court encounter in the Eternal Palace. Queen's Court is a very straightforward encounter as a healer, with a very predictable damage pattern and consistency in the amount of healing that's necessary between pull to pull. And the amount of healing that's actually necessary to get through the entire encounter is not very high with 4 healers. And since DPS is really tight here, especially if you don't have the most optimal comp, and most likely you will see in Rage before you kill the boss for the first time, a lot of the optimizations comes from actually increasing the amount of damage that you're doing in the fight while only doing enough healing to keep the raid alive. This makes Discipline especially good for this fight with our ability to multi-dot each of the bosses and the significant amount of DPS that you can put out as a Discipline Priest, both during the times where you need to be healing and the times where you don't need to be healing. For talents, I recommend the standard talents with Sins of the Many and Purge the Wicked, since with 2 targets, Purge will probably win out over Halo in every situation, and Shadow Covenant is absolutely not necessary in order to save people in this encounter. Also, there are times that the raid is taking so little damage that you probably don't even need to put Atonement on the tanks, and this leads to the maximum DPS effect of Sins of the Many to heavily outperform any alternative. For essences, I definitely recommend the Ever Rising Tide because there are a couple of points in the fight where you need to do maximum amount of healing with your evangelism, and you are unlikely to run into any mana problems even while using the Ever Rising Tide, as long as you only use it during those points where the extra healing is absolutely necessary. However, if you do find that mana is a real problem for you, then it's possible that Lucid Dreams might be a better option. For Minor, while in terms of HPS, the Well of Existence is really good here, I recommend taking Crucible for your Minor, especially if you're rank 3, since it's fairly common that you will get multiple stacks of the debuff on each of the boss because you purge up on them 100% of the time, and the damage that it does throughout the entire encounter is very significant. The same idea goes for trinkets, with either using the first sentence or the Alchemist Stone for your first slot, and using the Mechagon Trinket for the most amount of damage for the second. If either your DPS heavily outgears the encounter or you have a lot of multi-dotters making Enrage a non-issue, then you can opt for more healing intensive setup with your talents, essences, and trinkets. I really recommend not using your Rapture with your evangelisms on this fight, as there are parts where individual members need to be saved using Rapture shields outside of your burst heal timers. With that all in place, let's go over some of the most important parts of the fight for Discipline Priest. Right on pull, you want to drink a DPS potion, ideally Unbridled Fury, put dots up on both of the bosses, and use your first schism right away into doing the most amount of damage with your trinket and other DPS abilities. Around 20 seconds in, the first set of orbs spawn, and this is when you need to prepare for your first evangelism. Since you have Bloodlust, it's very easy to get a 20 Atonement Evangelism here, and you should definitely aim to achieve that. You'll even have time to put in a 8, 9, or even 10 stack Ever Rising Tide in the middle of your ramp, which will be very useful as you will be healing 2 form ranks and 1 Ad Explosion, as well as soaking a charge within this evangelism. You can opt to use Shadow Fiend here, but I recommend saving for your second evangelism because the 4th one that you're going to use is a very dangerous timing. So you'll only be able to use 1 Shadow Fiend between your first and second ramp, and the second ramp has a little bit more movement because it's during a deferred sentence, so you will have to be moving every few seconds. You should be able to cover 2 of the 3 form ranks with this ramp, and you'll be able to get in 2 penances and solaces during this window as well. Once the damage from the second form ranks is healed, even if there's a little bit of time on your atonements left, start using Rapture and putting shields on anybody that might not be at completely full health. The second orb here explodes at the same time as the 3rd of the 3 form ranks, and if anyone's not at full health, they can very well get one shot. Once that ends, use Radiance that just came back in time to heal the 3rd orb that's going to explode. From here, not much damage goes out, so feel free to keep atonements on the tanks, but try not to put any more atonements in that because you need to save as much mana as you can, and you should be really spending most of your GCDs on damaging the boss at this point. Make sure to keep up your dots on both bosses as often as possible as well. The next part where a lot of healing is required comes in at the end of Standalone. A charge comes in at this point, and because of Standalone, not everybody can soak this charge, so make sure that the people that are within the circle are not taking damage from each other, and if any one of them is not full health, try to put a shield on them to prevent them from getting one shot. As soon as this charge ends is when you need to start ramping for your second evangelism. After the charge, the standalone ends and the first sentence begins, where you have to stack on top of the new orb that just spawned and kill it right away. You want your ramp along with Shadow Fiend to finish the moment this explodes so that it also covers the second orb exploding. If you are assigned to use barrier at any point here, make sure you drop it at the proper time to reduce the most amount of damage from the first sentence as well as the orbs exploding. After this, Obey or Suffer comes in, so healing can't be done most of the time to anybody who takes damage, but when the tank that is tanking away from the raid is able to be healed, you need to make sure that you bring them to full health. While Power Wave Shield's Absorb can be used to save somebody that can't be healed from dying, it's rarely going to be enough to make a real difference. So it's more important to focus on healing people up when they are able to be healed and to give pain suppression to the tank during the rupture if needed. If you really have to, I guess you can use Rapture here in order to keep people safe during Obey or Suffer, but I really recommend saving it and using it when you're moving to the next form ranks that's about to spawn. At this point, it's possible that some people will have the Suffer debuff, so they can't be healed as the form ranks is about to come out. And generally, due to movement, it might be difficult for a lot of the healers to top everybody up. So it's important that you use Rapture here to put big shields on people who are potentially in danger of death when the first form ranks explodes. After that, try to use just a Radiance for each of the other two form ranks that's about to come. After that, another set of orbs spawn, but these orbs are not very dangerous. Just try to use your evangelism to either heal people up from the first orb explosion or to heal people from the second explosion in order to prepare them to survive the third. When standalone comes in near the end of these orbs, make sure you slowly move in towards Silivas as he's about to do an eruption, and since space will be very limited due to standalone, it's important that people who are able to move while doing their job do so to make as much room as possible for people who will be coming in later. I also choose to drink at this point because there's really no damage except for the tank that's outside going out, and since everyone's standing still inside the eruption with standalone, there's no danger of anybody accidentally bringing a mechanic to you where it would cancel your drink. After this is the first sentence. Make sure you spot heal anybody who is taking excessive amount of damage from it, and especially anyone else who's taking damage from other mechanics during this part. The next set of orbs spawn with Obey and Suffer, and make sure that you are helping DPS down the first one as soon as possible. If you're assigned to use Barrier here, make sure you do so, but I think Link, if you have it, is probably the better option to use here, as there will be a charge and a couple of those lightning debuffs out at the same time, and for damage patterns where different people take different amount of damage, but it's important to also heal the raid, something like Spirit Link is very good at stabilizing everybody to similar health and making sure that everyone survives regardless of what mechanic that they're facing. As soon as the first orb explodes and you soak the charge is when you want to start ramping for the next evangelism. This one is especially important since there will be form ranks coming out at the same time that two orbs are exploding, as well as both the lightning debuff and the charge coming in at some point. A lot of healing is required here, which is why I recommend saving your second Shadow Fiend for this point, which means you have to use it on the first or second evangelism and not anymore after that. This is another good time for Barrier if you're assigned to drop it at this point. Once you get past that part, you'll have another significant amount of time to just DPS the boss as much as possible. The last point of big incoming damage comes right before Enrage, when orbs spawn during standalone. The first orb is not particularly dangerous as standalone itself doesn't do any damage as long as you're spread out properly. But when the first sentence starts, the two orbs that are still remaining can easily kill somebody who is moving out for a charge or about to drop a large stack of their debuff. This is where you probably want to use your last evangelism, and if you still have Rapture at this point, make sure you use it as well and put it on people who are either moving out with charge or people who are about to drop a large stack of their first sentence debuff. After that, it is Enrage, and at this point, there's no more healing that needs to be done, so DPS the bosses as much as possible. If you or any of the other healers are targeted by the last charge, it's recommended that you just sacrifice them instead of soaking it, because it's going to be Enraged now anyway, and it's more important that your DPS do as much damage to the bosses rather than coming out to help soak the charge. If Enrage timer is an issue even with everyone alive, try to cut back on your atonement count as much as possible for the highest damage amplification from Sins of the Many, and try to do as much damage as possible during parts where your raid won't die even if you don't heal anybody. I hope this video helped you plan out the Queen's Court encounter as a Discipline Priest, and I will see you guys in the next video.